4th of 2019, an additional court order was obtained to have the child's remains exhumed once again. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Washburn examined the remains and was able to obtain the required amount of DNA to apply modern forensic techniques. The child was reinterred and portions of the remains were retained for future testing. Contemporary forensic applications and techniques, including genealogical DNA testing and inquiries, were made with the assistance of genetic genealogists. The results of the DNA testing were uploaded to DNA databases, and the results were interpreted by the genealogists involved in this investigation. Based on the interpretation of the results by the genealogists, detectives were able to locate and make contact with possible relatives of the child's family on the maternal side. Through further investigation and additional testing, the genealogists involved in this investigation were able to establish the identity of the birth mother of the unidentified child. A court order signed by a Court of Common Pleas judge to obtain the birth records, death records, and adoption records for all children born to the established birth mother between the years 1944 to 1956 from the Pennsylvania Department of Health, Bureau of Health Statistics and Registries, Division of Vital Records. There were 3 responsive results based on this order. 2 of the results were birth certificates for children born to the established birth mother during that time frame who were previously known to investigators, one of whom provided DNA and was matched previously by the genealogist. The 3rd result was a birth certificate for a male child born to the established birth mother in 1953, which could be consistent with the approximated age of the unidentified child. The birth father was listed on the birth certificate for the male child born in 1953. Based on research by detectives and the genealogists, a male was discovered who could possibly be the birth father of the unidentified child. Detectives were able to locate and make contact with possible relatives of the child's family on the paternal side. Through additional testing, the genealogists were able to establish the birth father of the unidentified child. A request was sent to the Social Security Administration Office of Inspector General to determine if a Social Security number had ever been issued in the name of the child. The response from the Social Security Administration was that there had not been. Homicide investigators, Detective Bob Hesser and Detective Greg Santamala, as well as Forensics Laboratory Manager Ryan Gallagher, met with Dr. Albert Chu of the Medical Examiner's Office. Dr. Chu was apprised of the aforementioned facts. Dr. Chu also consulted with the genetic genealogists involved in this investigation. Dr. Chu indicated that based on the facts presented and the conclusions of the genetic genealogists, the death certificate for the unknown child, OME number 57-0863, would be amended to reflect the child's birth name, Joseph Augustus Zorelli. Joseph's date of birth is January 13th, 1953. Before I turn things over to our Chief Medical Examiner for the City of Philadelphia, Dr. Constance D'Angelo, I would like to address 3 questions which I believe most of you would like an answer to. The first is going to be, who are the child's parents and what are their names? At this point in time, we are not going to be releasing that information. Joseph has a number of siblings on both the mother and father's side who are living, and it is out of respect for them that their parents' information remain confidential. The second question is obviously going to be, do we know who was responsible for Joseph's death? The answer at this time is unfortunately no. We have our suspicions as to who may be responsible, but it would be irresponsible of me to share these suspicions as this remains an active and ongoing criminal investigation. The third question, I believe, is going to be, are you currently working on any additional unidentified persons cases? The answer to that question is going to be yes, we absolutely are. There is an ongoing effort to apply the technology and techniques used in this investigation to other unknown human remains cases. These investigations involve victims of homicide, cases deemed to be suspicious in nature, as well as accidental or from natural causes. A team of investigators from the Homicide Unit's Cold Case Squad, our Special Victims Unit, Long-Term Missing Persons Squad, Forensic Science Bureau, the Office of the Medical Examiner, and the District Attorney's Office meet on a weekly basis to review and identify cases that would benefit from the application of these techniques to further their respective investigations. There are currently more than a dozen cases in progress right now, and as leads are developed, they are pursued by investigators and worked on by other members from the group. I'll now turn things over to Dr. D'Angelo.
Hey, good morning. I guess I'm the only one who had a PowerPoint presentation. So yes, we do have the child who is known as the boy in the box. He was our case number 863 of 1957. Just so you can see a little review of DNA. DNA was actually discovered way back in the 1800s, and by 1953 we knew the structure of DNA, but that's as far as DNA technology had progressed. So in 1957, Dr. Spellman had these other methods of identification available to him to try and pursue who this child was. Visual identification was one of the main forms how we identify people, and that remains the case even up to today. Since this was a child, they actually did take his footprints, and there were attempts to match this child's footprints to some possible leads. So the footprints that were taken at birth, they were actually looked at. Hair comparison, that was also very big in this case. There were hair fibers that were found on the child, and then also some of the items that were found with the child or nearby. Unfortunately, it's really just, yes, this could be from the child or this could be from someone else. So it doesn't really identify who the person is. There's also the ability, if this child had had any sort of x-rays, that the x-rays could be compared. In this child's case, they did use the x-rays to help give an age range for this child, because as it was said, he appeared very malnourished, which would then mean he would look much younger than his actual age. Next slide, please. So in the 1950s, after this case was discovered, the newspaper clipping on the far right, that was actually in the paper. It is a photograph from the time of autopsy and the particulars relating to this child. And again, the hope was that someone would come forward. There were some scars noted on this boy's body, and Dr. Spellman believed that this meant that this child had undergone intravenous fluid administration when he was very young. And so this information was put out, and all of the different hospitals were contacted to see if they would go through their records to see if they could match up anyone. And then the poster was actually one that was provided by the Inquirer. It was posted all over the city, and it was also included in the gas bill that was mailed to Philadelphians. Next slide, please. Two other techniques that were tried on the far right. A death mask was actually also made for this child. And one of the medical examiner investigators actually retained this mask, and when he would go follow up on a lead, he would have that mask with him. The other photo of the boy, this is actually the body of the child. They did dress him. They put him in a pose so that this might trigger someone to recognize this child, because now he's clothed, he looks sort of natural, and they were really hoping again that someone would come forward and identify him. Next slide, please. So again, they did take his footprints. They did try and match to several leads that they had, but it was not a match. Let's see. The other thing, They had the police cadets and other police go to all the orphanages and foster homes to make sure that all of the children in those facilities were accounted for. And then the last clipping is about a handkerchief, which seems to possibly be a red herring, but at the bottom, you'll notice that at that time, people were actually allowed to come into the medical examiner's office and visually look at the deceased body. And there were a number of people who did come forward to look at the child, and then either investigators from the ME's office or from the police department actually followed up on those leads. And those children who were suspected of being this child were found alive. Next slide. So over the years then, we did have advances in DNA, and by 1992, it had progressed to the point where there were commercialized kits to do the DNA fingerprinting. And so that led to the decision to exhume the body again in 1998 to try and get additional material for DNA testing. The case was also uploaded into NCMEC in 2014, and again in attempts that someone, not in this part of the country would recognize this child and come forward. And then finally in 2019, the body was again exhumed to obtain additional samples for DNA, which after many years was actually successful. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm introducing Ryan Gallagher from the Office of Forensic Sciences.
Good morning, everyone. As Dr. D'Angelo said, my name is Ryan Gallagher. I'm the unit manager for the criminalistics unit with the Philadelphia Police Department's Office of Forensic Science. The criminalistics unit is responsible for all forensic DNA-related casework in the Philadelphia Police Department and the City of Philadelphia. The unit maintains a state-of-the-art DNA laboratory, performing traditional forensic DNA analysis, modern rapid DNA technology, and coordinating all other DNA testing for the City and Police Department. Throughout this investigation, the Office of Forensic Science has performed or consulted on much of the forensic work that has been performed in this case. Several attempts using forensic DNA technology to identify the boy have been made over the past 20 years. Specifically, the boy's DNA profile was entered into CODIS and searched continuously for matches to immediate biological relatives. CODIS is the acronym for the Combined DNA Index System, which is managed by the FBI and is the National DNA Database. This database is used to search crime scene samples and compare to DNA reference samples to solve criminal investigations. A portion of CODIS is maintained for DNA samples from unidentified remains, and those DNA profiles are compared to DNA samples from family members of missing persons. There were no matches in CODIS in this case. With typical DNA processing, our scientists in the lab examine 24 areas along your DNA to develop a profile. With advancements in DNA technology, it is possible to examine thousands of areas along your DNA. For standard forensic DNA analysis that we do every day, this expanded testing is not necessary. However, the analysis of this additional DNA has created a new capability for investigating cases by revealing potential familial relationships. This growing field is often called forensic genetic genealogy or investigative genealogy. In a few moments, you'll hear from Dr. Colin Fitzpatrick of Identifiers International, the company that worked tirelessly on this investigation with the police department and the Office of the Medical Examiner. We also like to thank several other forensic laboratories that have helped and provide analysis over the years, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation. While today's event centers on the identification of this child, it's equally important that we mention larger efforts to bring closure to other families in our city. The Office of Forensic Science has implemented a forensic genetic genealogy program to assist the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office and the Philadelphia Police Department with investigations involving the identification of unidentified human remains or unknown suspects in criminal cases. Due to limitations with the technology, Not every case is going to benefit from this. However, the police department continues to evaluate all applicable cases and determine eligibility. In cooperation with the Homicide Unit, the Special Victims Unit, the Philadelphia Office of a Medical Examiner, the Forensic Genealogy Program has initiated testing in dozens of cases. These cases range in years from 1957 through 2022. The program emphasizes a collaborative effort between forensic scientists and detectives to uncover and follow up on investigative leads. Joseph Augustus Zarelli represents the first identification of human remains using forensic genetic genealogy as a result of this collaboration. While this is the first, it will definitely not be the last identification that is made. Our goal for the project is that there will never be another unidentified homicide victim in the city of Philadelphia. We have established a process for all new unidentified remains and are working through the records of all previous homicides to identify cases which may be included in this program. In reality, we may not attain the lofty goal of 100% identification for a variety of reasons. However, the identification of America's unknown child strengthens our resolve. The victims of a homicide deserve, and their families deserve, no less. And I'll introduce Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick from Identifinders International.
My name is Colleen Fitzpatrick. I'm president of Identifinders International. I want to say this was the most challenging case of my whole career. It took 2.5 years to get the DNA in shape. It was so bad to get to the point where we could create SNP data that we could use for genealogy. Our success was a cooperation among experts from several countries. This was an international program. And the good news is that the technology that we push forward is giving hope to other unidentifieds whose DNA is thought to be beyond the technology of modern horizon of technology. Maybe it isn't, after all. There's so many people I'd like to thank. I'd like to thank first Detective Bob Hesser, who was just so patient and did so much investigative work on that side of the forensic genealogy. I would like to thank the Philadelphia Police Department and the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office for all the resources that they've devoted over the decades to this case. I'd like to thank the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the VDOC Society for keeping the case alive for so many years. The International Commission for Missing Persons in The Hague for their guidance, their expertise, and the networking they did to send us in the direction of the experts who made this happen with us. Those experts, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I will honor that, but they know who they are, and they're probably watching right now, so thank you. I want to thank AudioChuck for a grant funding that covered some of our critical expenses. And last but not least, I want to thank Mr. Gillis, top-notch forensic genetic genealogist, one of the best you will ever meet, who hung in there for 2.5 years with me as we fought that uphill battle on the DNA front. And when that data came in, she worked night and day to get that boy his identity back. Because, after all, what can we hope for in life and death but to be buried under a stone carrying our own name? So thank you, everyone, for your assistance over these years. We appreciate it. And now I'd like to introduce Bill Fleischer from the VDOC Society.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning, everyone. Since February 1957, hundreds of investigators have worked to put their hearts and souls in solving the mystery of our little boy's identity and the circumstances of his death. Many of these men and women aren't with us anymore, but I feel their souls are standing here at this moment with us. Now our lad is no longer that boy in the box. He has a name, and I was raised to believe that when you say the name out loud of a loved one, that person still lives in spirit amongst us. Soon, through the good offices of Mr. Dave Drysdale and his team at the Ivy Hill Cemetery, the VDOT Society will put a name on that child's grave. Joseph Augustus Sorelli will no longer be that boy in the box and will no longer be unknown. On behalf of the VDOC Society, I want to thank the Philadelphia Police Department, Police Commissioner, the homicide detectives throughout the years, the medical examiner's office investigators, Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick and Misty Gillis, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and all the people of the media and the public who have, throughout the years, have tirelessly kept this story alive and contributed greatly to putting the name on his gravestone. God bless you all for keeping the faith. Thank you. I would like to turn it back to Captain Smith.
All right, folks, at this point in time, we will open it up to Q&A.
Officially said unknown for the manner of death. How and when did you guys determine that it was indeed a homicide?
Well, that was determined early on in the investigation.
Right, so why was the death certificate not changed? I guess when was that determined? Because the death certificate says unknown still.
I can't answer that question.
Okay, but it is in fact that he was killed, it was a homicide.
That's correct.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about that part of the case, of what you know of how he was killed or what happened to him?
Well, I described the injuries. He had abrasions, he had contusions, so he basically had blunt force trauma. From what I understand, he was also emaciated. Okay, so, but I'm going to say blunt force trauma was more than likely the cause of death.
Yeah, with an investigation that now has a name, what changes behind the scenes? What does this give your detectives? Where do you go from here?
All right, so the job's, it's over 65 years old now. All right, so that's definitely, it's going to be an uphill battle for us to definitively determine who caused this child's death. If this technology had been available to us 20 years ago, it might have been a completely different story. Because once you identify who the child is, and then that's what you start beginning with family members. Well, at this point in time, a lot of the family members who would have been old enough to have a memory of any incident that might have occurred are normally long gone.
So are you saying there's a possibility that you may never make an arrest? Who's responsible for the homicide of Joseph Augustus?
That's correct. We may not make an arrest. We may never make an identification, but we're gonna do our darndest to try.
When you talk to the relatives, you ask them the names of why nobody came forward in 1957 and say, hey, I think that's Joseph. I think.
Yeah, that's going to be part of the investigation. And again, I will go to probably time and time again. It's an ongoing and active investigation. So I'm not going to comment on that, sir.
What was the reaction from the family when detectives came forward with this information?
I'm not going to comment on that either.
Where was he from?
Where
Where was he from?
where was the child from? What section of the city? West Philadelphia, we believe.
Was he ever reported as a missing child?
No.
Never? Was not?
No, never, sir. Both parents are deceased.
Do you think that someone in his family killed him?
I can't comment, sir. Ongoing active investigation.
Captain, when it comes to other, you mentioned this, the other victims and other, have a potter's field of more than we know about it, if there are some others scattered around. Can you talk about the efforts to meet and identify, and maybe the city's efforts, I don't know what to say, the city's efforts to maybe getting grant money to try and use this technology in identifying other people who just are unidentified, who have no name, whether they're homicide victims or not?
Right. Well, I can't speak to grant money. Okay, that's out of my wheelhouse. But we do, yeah, there are efforts as I've described. Captain Kearney, is he here? Yeah, could you just talk a little bit about what you guys are doing? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Captain James Kearney. I represent the Special Victims Unit. I'm the captain there and the commanding officer. At Special Victims, we are responsible for approximately 80 long-term missing person cases, and we are dealing on a weekly basis with forensics and other entities, both locally, state, and federal, to help aggressively identify the long-term missing persons and unidentified remains. We have been at that Potter's Field. I don't want to go into specifics, but we will do everything we can to make sure that the cases we can bring forward, we can give those people a voice and to find out what happened to them and why they're there. Like I said, there are many. We have decentralized the missing person unit in the department, so some of the missing person cases are back into the detective divisions, into the neighborhoods where they went missing from. But we are weekly, like I said, we sit down with all and collaborate with all the entities on stage here and not. But we deal with NAMUS and NCMEC, and we're getting there. We're getting there. It's exciting time. It's exciting time in investigations. It's exciting time for my investigators to have this technology, to have people like Ryan Gallagher and the director of forensics with us on board to do exactly that.
This being has been kind of very fantastic. Can you just talk about kind of what it is like to make something like a DNA profile of maybe one of the same cases if they do get DNA one day from and kind of try and build out what that family tree like? It kind of goes in different lengths of time, correct?
We've solved cases in 2 hours, and we've solved cases in 3 years. And we've solved cases that are still on the table. I mean, we're working on cases that are still on the table after 3 years. This is a brand new technology as of 2017-18. So the oldest cases you're going to find are 3 or 4 years right now that haven't been solved. But as the databases grow and our tools develop and we go forward with the technology, there's going to be a lot more, and it's going to go a lot more quickly. This is a brand new technology, and you've got to give us time to move forward with it. Every case we solve, we learn something from that pays forward to the next one. So we look forward to a lot more success stories.
How long has this boy lived in West Philadelphia and his family?
That's not a question for me to answer.
I'll take care of that. Thank you. Well, the child that just turned 4 years old, right?
His family had roots there, or did they just move there? Or?
I can't say with any degree of specificity that how long he was there. All right. So,
What I'm trying to say is none of the neighbors noticed him missing, you know, and seeing all the TV coverage and the newspapers and the bulletin and the fire, nobody put two and two together that, you know, child was no longer here in that scene.
well, sir, we just discovered who the child was.
Right, but they had the picture. When the picture, you look,
Right.
the child.
I can't answer that question, sir. I don't know what the neighbors knew or didn't know. But yeah, there are a couple pieces of evidence in our custody. All right, one of which we're doing an examination for possible DNA. All right, it was an article of clothing that was left at the crime scene. But you know, like I said, the evidence between then and now it's diminishes. Just like the child's DNA degraded and became very, very difficult to extract a strain of DNA that was viable. What kind of proof is there? That was done through genetic testing.
So the father, we're hearing that the family is saying, the dad's side, that there's no physical proof connecting him to this child.
Well, that's not true.
Okay, so
Yeah.
can you just elaborate on what the proof is? And is it the person on the birth certificate, or was there further testing done with DNA?
Okay, so it is going to be the person that's on the birth certificate. All right, the name on the birth certificate is not exact. It's not exact. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. All right, so, but it is the birth father.
How do you know that?
Well,
Genealogy.
yeah.
Now, it's the genealogical connections. When we look at the data, we see what we call matches or DNA cousins, and we network them. And there were cousins on both sides of the family that can only funnel to that one individual, can only be connected to that one guy. And so that's how we identified the parents, the family, and so on. There is all of that in place.
I got a question for Captain Smith. If you could talk a little bit about where the investigation goes from here. Adding more people, is there going to be a re-interview of all the family members? How would you classify where it goes from here? And the other point is, could you talk about how there's a possibility the killer might even be dead? Or since this happened so long ago, this is one to talk to, might not even be alive anymore.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm hoping comes out of this press conference is that we receive an avalanche of tips from the public. We're going to filter through each and every one of those tips, but in that avalanche, there might be a diamond in the rough. I'm hopeful that there's somebody who was in their mid to late 70s, possibly 80s, who remembers that child. All right, the child did live until a little over past the age of 4 years old. So there would have been somebody out there that would have seen this child, perhaps another family member that hasn't stepped forward, possibly a neighbor, okay, a neighbor that remembers seeing that child, remembers whatever occurring at that particular household. That's what I'm hoping comes out of this. Of course, we're going to be revisiting the family members. The assigned investigator, we just had a member down at the homicide unit. So like I said, this remains an active investigation. We're going to continue to work this.
Captain, are surviving family members still in the area? Secondly, other than charges related to the actual homicide, are there other charges possibly in play?
I'm not going to comment about whether where the family members live, whether they're in California, Delaware, or in this immediate vicinity. I'm just not going to comment on that. And as far as other charges, what other charges what would you be alluding to?
Asking about possible obstruction, other related counts that may conceal the actual crime.
I'm not going to comment on that. There were siblings on both sides. An exact number, their ages, whether they were male or female, we're not going to comment on at this time. Is there a theory? I mean, the theory would be common sense, it was far away from their house. At that point in time, that area of Fox Chase was pretty rural.
Captain, are we talking West Philadelphia proper, Overbrook Park, Overbrook? Is there a specific neighborhood of West Philadelphia?
I mean, I can narrow it down. It's 61st and Market area. 61st and Market Street. It's the longest that I'm aware of in Philadelphia. Yes.
All right, folks, we have time for two more questions.
While the technology that was used to, get to this point of investigation has been developed, the whole question of all that attention that has been, brought to bear as long ago homicide. When we have homicides every day in this city, and most of them are solved. But Mr. Outlaw, what would you say to people who say you can't even solve cases that happen?
We can solve half of the cases in this city, and we have. Because we announced something historic today does not take away from the arduous work of our detectives and surrounding partners here in this city. I can understand why people may feel that way, but this case was a big deal. I mean, this case outlives a lot of people that are standing here today in our current profession. So I don't want to take away from the use of technology that's never been used before in previous cases that we're hoping to use in a lot of our cases moving forward. There are still many other unsolved cases, and as you heard here, We believe this will be the first of many. So I would ask that everyone not lose hope, but recognize that this is something breaking for us and that we're hoping to use it moving forward so that we can continue to improve not only how we provide service, but to improve the qualities of our investigations. You want to talk about that, Steve?
So, as I mentioned, this technology can be used for many cases. We continually evaluate in these weekly meetings that was talked about what cases would benefit from these. So whether it's unidentified remains or whether it's trying to determine who a suspect might be in a criminal case. But it can be applied for all the cases depending on their eligibility.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Just one really quick question, if anybody can answer it about, there have been all these theories over the years that this puts all of those to rest.
That would be one for the answer is no. We have to leave everything. It's an open investigation, so we have to make sure it's not that we're going to re-examine everything. Who knows what's going to happen? Right. Additional details that we get, which allows us to look at information very differently.
So it can't say like, no, it wasn't this Campbell woman, it wasn't the foster home. They can't definitively say those are off the table.
Not at this point. Not at this point.